2016, some of us were sitting around talking, and we wanted to do some work with nitrogen placement and rate. That's always a question that farmers have. So along here you can see the treatments we had that year, 2016. We had a broadcast treatment. You can see I took some white spray paint. I don't know if this was a good idea or not, but I tried to paint in there to show where the nitrogen would have been applied. A broadcast treatment, everybody understands. It would have been from row to row or plant to plant, evenly broadcast throughout the canopy or the row. The next treatment was a coulter injected in the center of the alley, and which you see the line there where the nitrogen would have been applied in a band right through the center. We also had a surface applied, so we just, instead of putting a coulter and injecting it, we just put a surface band down in the center of the row again, and you can see the line there that denotes where that nitrogen went. The fourth treatment that year was not a wide drop. We'll talk about that in a second. This was a homemade wide drop. We knew these things were coming on the market. We thought, well, we don't have the money to buy one. Let's try something out. So we just simply took a drop nozzle you can buy at any supply store and put a split or a Y on it and put some orifices in and some hoses. Voila, for a few dollars and some travel, we had Y drops. If you look at the white lines here, that shows about where we were getting that nitrogen. If we held it at the right level under the canopy, but at the right height, I could put nitrogen in a band 4 to 6 inches from the plant. We were pretty happy with that. Pretty consistent, a little dance around a little bit, but pretty consistent with that. So that was 2016, and this test was over here at the Blackland tour at Engelhard at Dawson Pugh's farm that year. These were our 4 treatments, and you notice here we have a rate. I'll talk about that in a second. That year we had 3 rates: 25 gallons, 30 gallons, and 35 gallons, I believe. We got no difference in rates that year, and I'm looking for Deanna Osmond because I asked her to come around, and we got plenty of soil science people here, so we can really talk this thing up. We had no difference in yield based on fertilizer rate that year, and we haven't had it in any subsequent year, even as we picked up the rates. And again, I'll cover that in a second. So this was 2016. In 2017, we added this treatment. We found some money and we purchased the Y drops, which I think most people are fairly aware of now and have seen them working. You can see where I tried to paint there. That is exactly where the nitrogen is going with that unit. It does, as advertised, put nitrogen at the base of the plant. As Ron Heiniger mentioned earlier, that there's a benefit to that because the architecture of this plant, even a dew, it'll channel water down and possibly help to work that nitrogen at the base of the plant into the plant. So not a bad thing. So we added this in 2017. That year, our rates were 30, 35, and 40 gallons, I believe. We picked our rates up, still got no difference by rate, nothing. All the yields were statistically not significant, no increase in rate. 2018, we did the same thing. Now, the test you see here today is exactly what 2018 was. Treatments just as I've described them so far. That year, as this year, we changed our rates from 30 gallons to 30 gallons. Our middle rate was 40 gallons, and our upper rate was 50 gallons, thinking, man, we'll be sure we'll get some kind of difference in yield with these different rates. And lo and behold, over 3 years of this, we've had no difference in yield based on our rates at all. We have seen 1 or 2 consistent points that I will mention. That first treatment, the broadcast treatment down there that I painted the alley completely white, that treatment has consistently been the lowest yielding treatment in this test. Every year, broadcast is the lowest yield. These other treatments will vary a little bit as far as what's a little bit better or worse. Though, I'll say this too, second thing we're learning broadly is that when we lump the treatments together, the Y drop and the one that we call the near to the plant, if we take those two and compare them to the other treatments that we saw, we get 2017 a 6 bushel yield increase by putting the nitrogen closer to the row, and last year we got 8 bushels difference, positive yield, by placing nitrogen closer to the row. We're not seeing, though, the difference between the Y drop and our homemade Y drop. So Scott mentioned, you know, one of the reasons we did this was to test equipment or test technologies that are out there. The farmers want to know about it. They like to save some money. Do I need to spend money on this? Right now, it's hard to argue with the fact that the wide drop that we made was doing just as good a job yield-wise as what you can do with this. And these weren't given to us. Again, we purchased them, so we can, you know, we don't owe anybody any favors or anything. That's what we're seeing.
What was your lowest nitrogen rate?
The lowest one we did was 2016. That was 25 gallons. That year it was 25, 30, and 35.
And then how much that plant?
Okay, that leads me to my next point, Carl. Thank you for that. What we've figured out, and I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes, what we've not taken into consideration in any of this is how much nitrogen was put up front. We would go into a farmer's field that they already planted for the most part. We did plant this one, but sometimes we go into an established field and put these treatments out. So some farmers put a lot more than others at planting. That probably has some carryover, you know, or let's say an impact in what we're doing here. So we've got to put a little asterisk on this to a degree. But I know Deanna and I have talked a little bit in the past. Deanna Osmond, Soil Science Department, Crop and Soil Science Department at NC State University. And of course, Carl just retired from the soil fertility position here at the Vernon James Center. He's out here on his own dime today, Carl, so thank you for doing that. But I lost my train of thought now. What was I talking about?
Total nitrogen.
Total nitrogen. I don't know. There may be some things that are at play there that we need to take into consideration. Some people are putting a lot more. Well, it's either that or we're hitting a yield barrier somewhere else that's not nitrogen related, because we don't seem to get any difference amongst these rates. And 30 to 50 gallons is a pretty darn big difference. The other thing that, let's see, I told you that the broadcast treatment was consistently the poorest treatment or lowest yielding, and I told you that we're seeing a consistency between the two near to the plant treatments versus the ones that are in the center of the row. Those are the consistents that we're seeing, and again, I told you too that we had a 6 bushel yield increase between those two treatments, the near and the center of the row, in 2017 and last year. Last year, a wet year, our plots were miserably wet from the get-go, and I feel like that probably impeded our rooting to some degree, and maybe that impacted what we were able to do. We actually saw a higher yield increase putting nitrogen close to the row last year, 8 bushels difference. We'll see what this brings. If you can walk through and look at these plots and look at this corn, and I had challenged Ron to do the same thing, and he said he couldn't, so if you can see differences in this, then you're better than Ron Heidegger. That's saying something. You'll be a corn specialist. You'll see tip back, but again, I don't know how consistent that is. We're seeing it across the board. Let's walk on down this way. If Ron or anybody has any comments they want to make, or Deanna, anything that y'all have done as we walk, we're going to end up down here on the end. So, I try to learn from my mentors, agents that came before me, and they would always get out and dig a hole and look at roots. I'd never really done that before, but to do it like they did it, I got out and got a shovel in my hands and dug a root pit. I want to introduce y'all to my shovel, which is Yanmar over here. His name is Yanmar. I want to think I've gotten smarter in my old age instead of trying to dig this out. That's a pretty deep pit. The reason we did this was because I had played around at the house. I live near Bath, a completely different soil than this. If you notice all the roots you see here down at the bottom. And Ron, where's Ron at? Okay, all right, Ron. So I called on you to comment on this, and Deanna, again, y'all just jump in. And you had walked off when I got, yeah. I said, I saw you. So the question was, where we've seen increases in yield by putting nitrogen close to the row or in the center. I didn't think we were seeing that big of a difference, 5, 6 bushels, maybe 8 on a given year. I was expecting to see 15, 20. And when I started washing out here, I realized we got a lot of rooting in between this row, and some work that was done in Ohio or Iowa State or somewhere that's at V6, your roots have pretty much lapped in the 30-inch row alley. If we come in real early and do some of these treatment methods, would that possibly be a bigger difference, Ron? Have you, as opposed to a later treatment? We almost always go in at V6 or later just because of time. It's just by the time we get there, we're a little bit later. Would that be an issue? Or
well, I mean, it'd have to sit there longer before the root found it. So
yeah.
indeed, if you had wet conditions, it probably would have a lot more higher likelihood of loss by putting it in the middle.
Mm-hmm. You know, we always talk about that structure of the roots going down, but then I forget that you got a whole lot right out here.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see the main root system is
yeah.
sort of umbrella shape, what I call umbrella.
Yeah, right here.
It comes down out of those stem roots. But you look how deep some of those grow into the pit, and then, like you said, it's clear there where you're getting rooting into the center of the row. Those are small roots, but they're very active, so they're very efficient.
Yeah. I was going to dig this out and then wash it all out, and you see how I rigged this up. This is patented, by the way, so anyone wants to use this, you pay me $10 and you're free to do that. But I held my plants up, man, I had it, but you can't wash this stuff away very easily. It is extremely hard to wash out. The structure here is different. So what I ended up with, and we got in the pit and dug, and 4.5 feet down, we were finding live roots, which is significant, I think. But I couldn't wash them out. We had to, if you chip them out much, they break off. But we were amazed that we were getting this kind of rooting. Now, Jeff Sparks had a pit like this dug at the Blackland tour at his place up in Columbia a few years ago. Carl was there. And he was telling us that when they sampled the soil down low, they were getting higher pHs, maybe up to a 7. And that seemed to me strange, considering what I normally know about this kind of soil being pretty acid. And my question was, would we get that kind of rooting into that acid soil, or would it burn? Typically we hear it burns the roots off if it's an acid soil. But
I looked up the book value, and it describes this one as a pH of like 4.5 all the way down to 2 meters.
Okay, okay.
So it's
not as acid.
Down.
Well, that would.
But this is it's kind of an old edge of the lake rim area.
Yeah,
so
right.
Very unique.
To that point, and I should have bought my pointer. If you come close and look, you see a little brown line that runs across there, a little layer. It's real light brown. That's wood ash. This lake was formed from when a pocosin, a swamp on a hill, a very common term around here, burned. And organic matter, these soils will burn. If you don't believe it, I bet a lot of money off of some mountain boys when I was in school. I'd bet them money that we could burn our soil, and they didn't think you could burn that clay. They didn't know what we had. And I'd show them, we'd take some in a bucket and show them how we could burn it. This stuff will burn us an organic layer, but that layer of brown wood ash right there was overwashed from the lake or from that burn that settled here some way. Carl, you could probably speak to that better than I could. But we are getting deep rooting, and that's kind of a side note just because it was cool when we dug the pit, we saw it. You see the root architecture that we have. I think these roots in here maybe play into this some, Ron. Again, it's a theory.
Yeah, you got to remember you also have that moisture to move that nitrogen. It's soluble, so it's got that problem with putting it right in the middle of the row, particularly on the surface. If it's dry, even those roots sitting there are not going to get that nitrogen.
Right, right. Yeah, so it was pretty interesting, I thought. I don't know if anyone has any questions about this. We're doing this for a 4th year. We'll see what the data shows. We have 3 locations of this test. One is probably not going to make it to yield. The other 2 maybe will. We actually had some water, too much water in a spot, believe it or not, on a year like this. I still managed to lose a test plot to too much water. So we'll see what we get and get the data out this winter at the winter meetings. Any questions about it? Anything? All right, well, I think it might be starting to rain, and we got to clean up from this mess. I don't know, I think this is about it for everybody. Appreciate y'all coming, though. I hope you've enjoyed the day. Be sure and thank your sponsors, the people that made this possible. Can't do it without them, the farmers that donate the land. This is what Extension's all about. At Ron's level, Deanna's level, all of the specialists at the state level, agents like us, there's a few more here in the audience. We're going out and finding local resources to do stuff like this, to answer local questions, and that's what it's all about. So hopefully we do that and have some fun. I had no idea I had so much fun digging a root pit until I got on that. So that's now going to be an official piece of Extension equipment. I recommend you get one too. It's very, very fun and very useful. Well, yeah, you might have to work it a little bit, but yeah, Yanmar's a nice shovel to have. Thank y'all for coming.